Imagine walking into a quiet suburban neighborhood on a Saturday morning. Two houses sit side by side. Outside the first, a new luxury SUV gleams in the driveway. The owner steps out in a crisp designer jacket, checks his phone, and heads off to a brunch that will cost more than some people spend on groceries in a week. Inside the house, the credit card statements tell a different story. The second house has an older sedan with a small dent near the bumper. The owner wears the same unremarkable jacket he bought 3 years ago. He mows his own lawn. By almost every visible measure, he looks ordinary, maybe even a little behind. Yet the second man is the one who will retire early, fund his children's futures without stress, and sleep through market crashes without panic. The first man is one bad quarter away from the edge. This is not a morality tale about frugality. It is a description of how wealth actually accumulates when no one is watching. We live in an era that treats visible success as the only kind that counts. Social feeds reward the appearance of arrival. Cars, watches, kitchens, and vacations function as public proof that someone has made it. The quieter path, the one that keeps spending deliberately lower than income for years, registers as failure or at least as lack of ambition. That cultural judgment is expensive. It turns the very behaviors that build durable wealth into something people feel they must hide. The mechanism is simple and brutal. Wealth is not what you earn, it is what you keep and put to work. Every dollar spent on status is a dollar that cannot compound. The math does not care about your Instagram grid. Consider two people who both earn $120,000 a year after taxes in a mid-sized American city. Person A spends in a way that matches the image of someone doing well. New car lease, upgraded apartment, regular dinners out, nicer clothes, the occasional weekend trip. Their annual savings rate sits around 10%. Person B lives in a smaller place, drives a reliable used car, cooks most meals, and avoids the upgrades that signal arrival. Their savings rate is 40%. After 20 years, assuming a long-term market return of roughly 7% after inflation, Person A has accumulated a meaningful but still fragile sum. Person B has crossed into territory that changes the options available to them for the rest of their life. The gap is not the result of superior intelligence or secret investments. It is the cumulative effect of capital left alone. That difference compounds in more than one direction. Higher spending creates higher fixed costs. Higher fixed costs reduce the ability to walk away from a bad job, take a calculated risk, or absorb an emergency without high-interest debt. The person who looks successful often has less actual freedom than the person who looks ordinary. The irony is structural. Lifestyle inflation does not announce itself as a threat. It arrives as a series of reasonable upgrades. You get a raise. You move to a slightly better neighborhood. The car that once felt fine starts to look dated next to the ones in the office parking lot. Each step feels earned. None of them feels reckless. Yet the savings rate drifts downward while the surface of life improves. The engine that builds wealth is the gap between what comes in and what goes out. Narrow that gap, and the engine loses power, even if the salary keeps rising. There is a second, quieter cost. Visible wealth attracts attention and expectations. Friends assume you can pick up larger tabs. Family members treat you as a potential source of help. Colleagues and acquaintances update their mental model of what you can afford. The social pressure to maintain the image grows. Once you have signaled a certain level, dropping below it feels like public failure. The person who never raised the signal in the first place faces far less of that pressure. Their freedom is not only financial, it is social. Data on actual millionaires has long contradicted the popular image. Studies of self-made wealth repeatedly show that a large share of people with substantial net worth live in modest homes, drive older vehicles, and spend far less than their income would allow. They did not become wealthy by looking wealthy. They became wealthy by treating every unnecessary dollar of spending as a permanent reduction in future options. The ones who look the part often arrived later, or not at all, because the cost of looking the part consumed the capital required to get there. The cultural script runs in the opposite direction. Advertising, entertainment, and social media treat consumption as the visible evidence of success. The person who delays gratification for a decade is rarely celebrated in real time. The person who finances the appearance of success receives immediate social rewards. This creates a selection effect. The behaviors that look like winning are often the ones that prevent winning. The behaviors that look like restraint or even mild failure are frequently the ones that produce the outcome everyone claims to want. There is nothing noble about deprivation for its own sake. The point is not to live poorly. The point is to keep the gap between income and spending wide enough for long enough that capital begins to do real work. Once that capital reaches critical mass, the options expand dramatically. Work becomes optional rather than mandatory. Risk becomes manageable rather than existential. Time becomes something you can buy back. Those outcomes are difficult to achieve while simultaneously funding the image of someone who has already arrived. The pressure to look successful is especially intense for people who grew up without money. Rising into a higher income bracket can feel incomplete until the external markers catch up. The car, the clothes, the address become proof that the climb was real. That impulse is understandable. It is also one of the most reliable ways to stall the climb. The first substantial savings rate is often the hardest to protect, precisely because it arrives at the moment when the desire to signal progress is strongest. Markets and compounding do not negotiate with self-image. They respond only to capital left in place. A portfolio does not grow faster because its owner wears better shoes. It grows faster because more money was directed into it and left there. The person who accepts looking ordinary for a stretch of years is often the one who later has the quiet ability to stop working when they choose. The person who optimizes for the appearance of wealth frequently discovers that the appearance itself has become a permanent expense. None of this requires secret knowledge or extraordinary income. It requires a willingness to let the external scoreboard lag behind the internal one. In a culture organized around visible ranking, that willingness is rarer than high earnings. The result is predictable. Many high earners remain closer to financial fragility than their lifestyles suggest. A smaller group of quieter earners accumulate the kind of independence that does not need to announce itself. The question is not whether you can afford the nicer version of things. The question is what that nicer version costs in future options. Most people never run the calculation with enough honesty. They treat each upgrade as isolated. The system treats them as cumulative. What would change if the people who actually build lasting wealth stopped being the ones who look like they have not yet arrived?